Hello, IB Environmental students. Today we're going to be talking about the rainforest and looking at how it relates to a lot of the different biodiversity concepts and conservation concepts we'll be talking about in this unit. So before we jump too deeply in, we have to make some meaning of what would make the rainforest stable, how it relates to succession and diversity. So what is a stable ecosystem? It's one that's complex, has high diversity and low human impact. That's going to be very much related to succession, because if I have human impact, I'm restarting the process of succession. And we're going to also sometimes throughout this unit use the term inertia. It's the ability of an ecosystem to withstand change or have more resilience, a negative feedback loop to maintain equilibrium. So that stable equilibrium is to have some inertia and to be able to withstand some of that change. We want to increase the resilience or the inertia of an ecosystem. So even if it's struggling, which we'll see the rainforest is, we can make sure it's going to be healthy. But what we'll see in a second is the rainforest is in fact struggling, so we are going to have to think about ways to solve that problem. So let's learn more about the rainforest. So the rainforest, when we're talking about the rainforest, we are mostly going to be thinking about the Amazon rainforest, but there are rainforests throughout the globe. All right, 2% of the land surface, with 50 to 80% of terrestrial species. So that means that even though it's not taking up much space, it's taking up a lot of the diversity in our globe. It has very warm, constant temperatures and high humidity and rainfall. Remember, we must be specific when we talk about climatic factors. There's a lot of differences as you move up into the rainforest in its tree canopies. That's what vertical stratification refers to. And that means that the organisms in the canopy are specialized for the canopy. The organisms in the middle or on the ground are specialized for that, which creates a lot of the biodiversity. The other thing is the decomposition rates are extremely fast, and that makes very little litter and thin, poor soil. So actually it's kind of weird. The soil is not so great in many places in the rainforest, which is kind of bizarre. They don't have a lot of topsoil because decomposition just happens so quickly. Most of the nutrients are in the actual organisms, not in the soil. And one of the things we're going to be really focusing in on is this human impact piece, how it affects the stability of the rainforest. And the biggest component of that is deforestation. And it has really been a big deal and continued to increase over the last 40 to 50 years within your lifetimes, and something that we really want you as citizens of the globe to think about. But not only deforestation, there's just general pressure on the rainforest and societies there. All right, there's huge economic pressures. They have a lot of raw materials such as rubber and trees. That's going to lead to exports. They can also graze cattle. They have oil and gas. But related to all of that, even though they have so much, they're also rather poor. What's really difficult is socially and politically, there's a lot of population growth, all right? They are early in demographic transition. They subsidize tree plantations, which means they're just growing trees to cut them down. They've dealt with a lot of colonization of the first world onto this third world area. Oftentimes there's rebellions and civil unrest and small wars, and because of that the governments are very much struggling to have clear power and not be misusing that power. Related to the economic and social political stuff, we do see that there's not a lot of regulations, and that leads to some invasive species. People are deforesting, whether it's legally or illegally. And because of a lot of the deforestation, we're going to find that that's going to relate to climate change. We'll talk more about climate change as we get to future units. And that's also related to the poor soils. So as we continue to make poor soils even have less decomposing matter than they normally do, it'll get even worse. So not a good situation. No, no, no. So what are the consequences of this stuff? Well, a lot of this is going to affect the local rivers, just like how anything we do locally here affects the bay. The water is becoming more turbid. They have a lot more material, such as silt in the bottom, meaning the rivers are filling up and becoming more marshy. They're overloaded with nutrients, which we know is bad for eutrophication, and with that they're affecting coral reefs, which are also biodiversity hotspots. This is going to accelerate flooding and reduce the ability for them to be able to store water underground in their aquifers. It'll affect how the rains will fall, and will they be able to be caught in the aquifers. All right, the rains, because there's less tree matter to kind of hold the clouds up there in the cloud forests, they often move away. So why do we think these rainforests are so special? All right, well, here I really think it's hard to remember a lot of direct and indirect values we've talked about for environmental stuff. So here we're going to practice using some of those values that we've learned about, and that's one of the hardest things for students in IB Environmental. So you try on your own first. Right now we're doing this at home, but this could be done in class. All right, let's check over some things you could have written down. Some direct uses or values are things like timber. These are some actual natural capital. Medicinal plants, edible wild fruits, fiber, things that we don't necessarily think about that are indirect and valuable. These are kind of our services. Right? Our ecosystem services are soil fertility, flood control. When we have more trees, we can purify the water, avoid pollution. We'll have recreation and ecotourism. It'll help education. Really, these are our ecosystem services. That's why they're called indirect. But these direct things we could actually put to market. All right, so really good practice, guys. Make sure you got down at least 2 to 3 of those on each category. But another thing you have to worry about is that these are very much specific locations that have housed many specific cultures for a long time. These indigenous people are very much part of the land. They rely on the diversity for their survival. They have crazy, amazing ecological and cultural knowledge that sometimes we as more urban society do not. They know how to have sustainable agriculture using the land possibly very well, unless they're doing slash and burn, which is not super sustainable. And they have great ideas for natural medicine that could potentially help our society. But this is really tough because who owns the land? And so this is very controversial. Think about it kind of related to ethics or theory of knowledge. Who should be protecting the land? Should we create a reserve? Will these people get to live in the reserve? Or are they going to shoot people with their arrows if we're trying to bring in ecotourism? It gets kind of difficult. So even though the cultures are pretty awesome and we want to keep them, it gets kind of complicated.